All right, thank you, Alexandria.
Thank you. Sure.
We'll be watching that throughout the day. So in Twitter Files 4 now, what we basically have learned is that Twitter dressed up their own political bias in the semblance of a policy. Now, here's why that's important. I found these two tweets from Michael Schellenberger, the journalist in charge of revealing Twitter Files 4, to sum it up very well. He said, and he writes, the underlying problem, and he's quoting Will Oramus in this, is that the dominant platforms have always been loath to own up to their own subjectivity, saying, in fact, that their policy was just arbitrary. But they're loath to own up to their own subjectivity because it highlights the extraordinary unfettered power they wield over the global public square. He goes on, and places the responsibility for that power on their own shoulders, so they hide behind an ever-changing rule book, alternatively pointing to it when it's convenient and shoving it to the nearest rug when it is not.
It's a great explanation of what this release of files shows. There really was a Yoel Roth. I mean, remember when these things were happening? Is there a group of people back there just deciding what to dial up and who to cancel and who not to? That's really how it happened. The head of safety, it's always under safety. Safety's always the guys, right? So the head of trust and safety is sending Slack messages and messages to other people. There's utter confusion, and in that confusion, it sounds like Dorsey was convinced to sort of give a little bit more here and give a little bit more there. I mean, he started the company as the idea of a public square where free speech existed. Over time, he was worn down by ideologues. I mean, Twitter became the headquarters of the Democrat Party in some ways, of the elites who wanted to control the conversation. And so when Donald Trump became enough of a problem, they started crafting and changing their terms of service. Will, I thought your conversation earlier last hour around terms of service is interesting because it's not illegal. It reaches the level of unconstitutional and illegal when you're collaborating with the government. But internally, you can do what you want as a company unless you're bilking your customers or your users by changing your terms of service in the process. Then maybe you have a claim there.
But it also speaks to this broader loss of freedom that we're seeing in America, this erosion of free speech, this erosion of the mentality behind free speech. And to your point, it's always under the guise of safety, right? Yeah. During COVID, just give up your freedom. Just lock down 15 days to slow the spread turns into like 2 years, right? Oh, just give it up. Climate change. Oh, the solution is just giving up your freedom. And it's always under the guise of safety. And in reality, they can't keep us safe. And we were talking about this last hour when Mark Zuckerberg was before the Senate committee and Ben Sasse asked him to define hate speech. He can't, right? So this isn't something that they can protect Americans from. But, we know that the end goal is that censorship. The end goal is control. And, of course, they think they know best as the left. They look down on us and, they try to virtue signal to us and tell us how to live our lives. And they think that we need to be, it's about control. Mm-hmm.
Let's bring in Congressman Brian Mast. He's a retired Army Staff Sergeant. He served in Afghanistan. He's on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee as well. Congressman, great to have you with us this morning. We were talking about the role of Jack Dorsey. I think when talking about Twitter, and then by extension when talking about Jack Dorsey, we have to talk about the times that he said what we now know was happening at Twitter was not happening. And some of those statements from Dorsey took place in front of Congress. He said, we are not shadow banning, which I think then brings the question to anybody sitting in Congress, what can you do about that lie?
So one, the question to what can Congress do about it depends on whether he was subpoenaed under oath or whether he was just testifying, giving his own opinions. There's a literal distinction there when it comes to the House of Representatives. But is Congress and probably the Energy and Commerce Committee really going to hold Twitter to account for this? 100%. They were the biggest headquarters of posers anywhere. They were pretending to be a town hall when really they just wanted to be an echo chamber, and they could care less about anybody's 5 fundamental freedoms. If you wanted to exercise freedom of religion, they were going to say that that was hate speech. They weren't interested in you being able to petition the government. They were going to, as Twitter, petition the government to try and silence people, or let the government petition them and then acquiesce to them to silence people like President Trump and others. They weren't interested in free speech or anything else related to our fundamental freedoms. And I'd put them right up there with Bernie Madoff or FTX or Enron. They were fraudulent. And thank God Elon Musk came in and said he's going to stop the charade, stop the masquerade, and he's going to make them authentic.
Yeah, otherwise we wouldn't know any of this. To your point, here's another thing we may not be aware of. Here's part of the release, the Twitter files from Matt Taibbi. He tweeted this. He said, "This post about the Hunter Biden laptop situation shows that Roth not only met weekly with the FBI and DHS, but with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence." This is where these revelations get dangerous if the government was putting its thumb on the scale or implying or suggesting to a private company to do their bidding on censorship.
So this is very, very serious for Congress. I'm giving you my opinion right now of what I think took place. I don't think that FBI Director Wray was making this phone call. I don't think that DNI Radcliffe, who was a member of the House, was in there making these phone calls saying, hey, go out there and do this. I think you're talking about people somewhere in middle management that absolutely abused their power, abused their title, call up, hey, I'm from the FBI. I'm tasked with doing this. Twitter, we need you to go out there and do this. They were entirely out. We know they were entirely outside of the scope of what they should have been doing, but we have to believe that they were doing this in a very fraudulent way, and that there should probably be charges for individuals that were taking away the most fundamental law of the land. This should be the most important law, and that would be, our First Amendment rights of our Constitution, utilizing their power to do so.
Well, and Congressman, you're talking about freedom. I mean, you've sacrificed greatly for this country. You're willing to lay down your life for this country. How free of a country are we still?
You talked about it as you were, coming in on the intro. Everything is used to say, hey, we can make you safer, but we have to erode this freedom and this freedom and this freedom. We have to, look at your phone calls. We have to have the freedom of information, using the Patriot Act to be able to take anything that we want out of your emails or other places. We have to have secret courts to be able to go out there and look at people like President Trump or others, but you're never going to get to know anything about it. You have to have all this secret stuff to protect you. But really, think about why the Constitution exists. It exists to protect we the people from the government. That's why it has to exist, but it's being used to do the opposite.